The receptionist's eyes went wide as saucers when Nessa burst through the glass doors of Halver Architecture at 3:15 on a Tuesday afternoon. I was hunched over blueprints for the Morrison project, red pen in hand, when the commotion started. "Where is he?" Nessa's voice carried across the entire office floor. "Where's my husband?" I looked up from my drafting table to see my wife of 6 years standing in our reception area, mascara streaked down her cheeks, designer purse clutched against her chest like armor. Her usually perfect blonde hair hung in disheveled waves, and her silk blouse was wrinkled beyond recognition. "Ma'am, if you could just—" Jenny, our receptionist, started to say. "Don't you ma'am me," Nessa snapped. "I know he's here. Finn Halvor, get out here right now." Every head in the office turned toward me. My junior architect, David, raised his eyebrows in a silent question. The 2 interns stopped pretending to work on their computers. Even old Pete, who'd been with the firm since before I was born, peered over his reading glasses with undisguised curiosity. I set down my pen and walked slowly toward the reception area, my mind racing. 3 days. It had been 3 days since I'd answered one of her calls or responded to her texts. 3 days since I'd discovered what my private investigator, Angela, had uncovered about my wife's secret life. "Nessa," I said calmly, keeping my voice level. "What are you doing here?" She whirled around to face me, and I could see the desperation in her green eyes. "What am I doing here? What am I doing here?" Her voice pitched higher with each word. "You've ignored 91 calls, Finn. 91, and 47 text messages. You can't just disappear on me." The silence in the office was deafening. I could practically hear my colleagues' ears perking up, filing away every word for later gossip sessions. The security camera in the corner blinked its red light, recording everything for posterity. "I've been busy," I said, gesturing toward my desk covered in blueprints and project files. "You know how it is when we're approaching a deadline." "Busy?" Nessa's laugh was sharp and brittle. "Too busy to tell your wife you're alive? Too busy to come home for 3 nights straight?" That was rich, coming from someone who'd been living a double life for the past 2 years. I thought about the manila envelope Angela had handed me just 4 days ago, filled with photographs and documents that had shattered everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Like I said, I've been busy. I kept my tone neutral, professional. "Is there something specific you needed, or can this wait until I get home tonight?" Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the apartment lease signed under her maiden name, the Bitcoin transfers, the encrypted drive full of photos that would make a sailor blush. "I needed to know you were okay," she whispered, suddenly aware of our audience. "I was worried something had happened to you." "Well, as you can see, I'm fine." I glanced around at my co-workers who were doing poor jobs of pretending not to listen. "Maybe we should discuss this at home." Nessa nodded quickly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Yes. Okay, I'll see you tonight then?" "Sure," I lied smoothly. "I'll be home around 7. She hesitated for a moment like she wanted to say something else, then turned and walked back toward the elevator. The moment the doors closed behind her, the office erupted in whispered conversations. "Dude," David said, appearing at my elbow. "What was that about?" I shrugged and headed back to my desk. "Marriage, you know? Sometimes it's complicated." But as I sat back down and picked up my red pen, I couldn't concentrate on the Morrison project. All I could think about was the apartment at 1247 Pine Street, where my wife had been playing house with someone else for the better part of 2 years. The apartment where the neighbors knew her as Miss Varon, single and available. The apartment where she kept a completely separate wardrobe, separate life, separate identity. The apartment that was about to become the centerpiece of my revenge. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at the screen and saw Nessa's name, followed by a string of heart emojis and apologies. I deleted it without reading the full message and went back to my blueprints. 3 days of silence had rattled her enough to make a scene at my workplace. Good. That was just the beginning. I thought about the conversation I'd had with Angela yesterday when she'd handed me the second envelope, the one with the financial records, the one that showed exactly how much money had been quietly disappearing from our joint accounts. "Your wife's been busy," Angela had said in her gravelly ex-cop voice. "Real busy, and creative too. I'll give her that." The Bitcoin transfers alone totaled over $180,000. Money that had been systematically moved from our investment account to an anonymous wallet, then converted to cash through a series of transactions that would have impressed a money laundering expert. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was sitting in my desk drawer right now, locked away with all the other evidence Angela had collected. An encrypted external drive that had taken her IT specialist 3 weeks to crack. 3 weeks to uncover 2 years of documentation. Hotel receipts saved like love letters. Photos that left nothing to the imagination. Travel itineraries that perfectly matched the times Nessa claimed to be visiting her sick grandmother in Vancouver. The same grandmother who'd been perfectly healthy when I'd called to check on her last month. Every file Angela sent over felt like another brick dropped onto my chest. Nothing was hidden well enough once you knew where to look. Credit card statements told their own story. Reservations made weeks in advance, always paid in cash or routed through accounts I'd never seen. Boutique hotels, weekend escapes, midweek conferences that somehow never produced a single agenda or badge. It wasn't chaos or impulse. It was routine, planned, repeated. I realized that hurt wasn't coming from discovering the affair anymore. That wound had already opened and scabbed over. What hurt now was the precision. The care she'd put into deceiving me. The fact that lying had become part of her daily structure, something she'd optimized over time like a system that just needed occasional maintenance. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Ray's number. Ray owned a boxing gym downtown, the kind of place where blue-collar guys went to blow off steam after long days of construction work or factory shifts. The walls were scarred, the floors permanently stained, the air thick with sweat and old effort. It wasn't pretty, but it was honest. I'd been going there for the past month, ever since Angela first started uncovering the truth about my marriage. Hitting a heavy bag was the only thing that stopped my thoughts from spiraling. "Ray's gym," came the gruff voice on the other end. "Ray, it's Finn. You got time for a session tonight?" "Always got time for you, college boy. You sound like you need to hit something." "You have no idea." 7 o'clock work? Perfect. I hung up and stared at my computer screen, but the CAD drawings blurred together. Lines overlapped. Measurements lost meaning. All I could see was Nessa's face when she'd burst into my office. The desperation, the fear, not guilt, not remorse, fear of losing control. She was starting to realize that her carefully constructed world was falling apart, and she didn't even know why yet. She thought I was just being distant, maybe suspicious about her late nights and weekend trips. She had no idea that I'd already seen behind the curtain, that I wasn't guessing anymore. I was verifying. The intercom on my desk buzzed. "Finn?" Jenny's voice was cautious. "There's a call for you on line 2. Says it's urgent." I picked up the phone. "Finn Halvor." "Mr. Halvor, this is Patricia Chen from Morrison Development. We need to discuss some changes to the project timeline." For the next hour, I lost myself in work. Discussed square footage and load-bearing walls and permit requirements. Normal problems with logical solutions. The kind of problems that didn't lie to you, didn't pretend to be something else. If a wall couldn't support weight, you reinforced it. If a schedule failed, you redesigned it. Cause and effect, clean lines. Unlike marriage problems. Unlike discovering that the person you'd trusted most in the world had been systematically betraying you for years. But as I talked Patricia through the revised blueprints, A plan began forming in my mind. Careful planning and attention to detail, those were my strengths. I'd built a successful architecture firm from nothing by being methodical, thorough, and patient. Time to apply those same skills to a different kind of construction project. Time to build the blueprint for Nessa's ruin. The next morning, I sat in Angela's cramped office above a Vietnamese restaurant, surrounded by filing cabinets and the lingering smell of pho. Angela Martinez had been a Seattle police detective for 15 years before going private, and her office reflected her no-nonsense approach to investigation. Metal desk, fluorescent lighting, and a coffee maker that looked older than my marriage. "You ready for the rest of it?" Angela asked, sliding a thick manila envelope across her desk. "Because once you see what's in here, there's no going back to pretending everything's fine." I'd already seen enough evidence to justify leaving Nessa. The apartment, the financial records, the encrypted drive. Any one of those things would have been grounds for ending our marriage. But Angela's tone suggested there were deeper layers to this betrayal. "Show me," I said. She opened the envelope and spread out a series of photographs and documents. "Your wife's been busy, Finn. Real busy. And she's had help." The first photo showed Nessa entering a downtown coffee shop with a woman I recognized immediately, her best friend and quasi-sister-in-law, Lumi Varon. Lumi was technically Nessa's cousin, but they'd grown up together and called each other sisters. She was also someone I'd fired from my architecture firm 3 years ago for consistently showing up late and spending more time on her Instagram than on her drafting work. "Lumi's been facilitating everything," Angela continued, pointing to a series of time-stamped photos. "She's got keys to the apartment. She's been providing alibis. Look at this." She handed me a printout of text messages between Nessa and Lumi, recovered from Nessa's cloud backup. The conversation was from 6 months ago. Lumi: "Coast is clear tonight. F working late on the Morrison thing again." Nessa: "Perfect. O wants to try that new place on Capitol Hill." Lumi: "Just remember what we talked about. You deserve to explore yourself before you're tied down forever." Nessa: "We've been married 6 years, Lumi." Lumi: "Exactly. 6 years of him controlling everything. You need to know what else is out there." I read the exchange twice, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. She thinks I'm controlling? "Gets worse," Angela said grimly. She pulled out another document, a transcript from our marriage counseling sessions. "Your wife's been painting quite a picture of your relationship to Dr. Reeves." I stared at the pages, reading Nessa's version of our marriage history. According to her, I'd pressured her into marriage. I'd isolated her from her friends. I'd taken control of our finances to keep her dependent on me. None of it was true. We dated for 2 years before I proposed, and even then, I'd given her 6 months to think about it. Her friends came to our house regularly, or at least they had until recently, and the only reason I managed our finances was because Nessa had explicitly asked me to handle the investments and retirement planning, claiming she found it boring. "She's rewriting history," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Classic manipulation tactic," Angela agreed. "Make herself the victim so she can justify her actions. But here's the really interesting part." She pulled out another set of documents, bank records and cryptocurrency transaction logs. That money she's been moving, it's not just for her apartment and shopping sprees. She's been building a nest egg. 180,000 so far, all converted to cash and stored in a safety deposit box registered under her maiden name. She's planning to leave. Oh, it's worse than that. Angela's smile was grim. She's been telling her boyfriend that the money is already hers legally. Showed him forged documents claiming you'd already transferred assets to her as part of some prenup agreement. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "We don't have a prenup." "I know, but Orion Vanton doesn't know that." Orion Vanton, the name from the encrypted drive, Nessa's affair partner, a 34-year-old tech entrepreneur with a startup that developed meditation apps. According to Angela's research, he drove a Tesla, lived in a luxury condo in Belltown, and had a trust fund that supplemented his questionable business income. "How long have you been watching him?" I asked. 3 weeks, long enough to establish patterns. Angela pulled out a surveillance log. "He meets your wife at the apartment every Tuesday and Thursday evening, plus most Saturday afternoons. They go out to dinner, come back to the apartment, and he usually leaves around midnight. While I'm at home wondering why she's working so late. Gets better. Last week I followed them to a jewelry store in Bellevue. Orion bought her a necklace. $2,000. She wore it to your marriage counseling session the next day. I remembered that necklace. A delicate gold chain with a small diamond pendant. When I'd complimented it, Nessa had claimed it was a gift from Lumi for her birthday, which wasn't for another 4 months. "There's one more thing," Angela said, her voice gentler now, "about your father. My father had been battling cancer for the past year, and his condition had been deteriorating rapidly. He'd been talking about updating his will, making sure everything was in order before he passed. What about him? Your wife contacted his attorney 8 months ago, multiple times, claimed you were having medical issues that might affect your judgment, asked about the terms of his will, whether she was listed as a beneficiary, what would happen to his assets if something happened to you." The room seemed to tilt slightly. She what? His attorney, William Chen, documented everything. He was suspicious enough to call your father directly and ask about your supposed medical issues. That's when your dad decided to revise his will. Angela handed me a copy of the revised will, dated 8 months ago. My father had removed Nessa as a secondary beneficiary and added specific language stating that any assets left to me would be held in trust, protected from marital property claims. "He knew," I said, staring at the document. "Somehow he knew." "Fathers have good instincts about these things," Angela said. "The attorney said your dad didn't give him specifics, just said he wanted to protect your interests in case anything happened." I sat back in the uncomfortable metal chair, trying to process everything. The affair was bad enough. The financial theft was devastating. But the fact that Nessa had been circling around my father's inheritance like a vulture, trying to manipulate his attorney while he was battling cancer, that was something else entirely. "What's your plan?" Angela asked. I thought about Nessa's performance at my office yesterday. The tears, the desperation, the public scene designed to make me look like the bad guy. She'd been playing a long game, setting up her exit strategy while positioning herself as the victim of a controlling, distant husband. "She set the rules," I said finally. "She decided that our marriage was just a cover story for whatever she really wanted to do. She's been planning her escape for months, maybe years, building her case, moving money, creating her backup identity. And I'm going to let her know that I've been paying attention." Angela leaned back in her chair. "What do you need from me?" "Everything documented and legally admissible. I want copies of all the financial records, the apartment lease, the surveillance photos. I want transcripts of those text messages between her and Lumi, and I want you to keep watching them." "For how long?" "Until I'm ready to make my move." I stood up and gathered the documents, sliding them back into the manila envelope. "There's going to be a reckoning, Angela, but it's going to be on my terms, not hers." "Just remember," Angela said, as I reached the door, "revenge is a dish best served cold, but it's also a dish that can poison the cook if you're not careful." I paused with my hand on the doorknob. "She's been poisoning me for 2 years. I think it's time to return the favor." Outside, the Seattle drizzle had started again, turning the sidewalks slick and gray. I walked back to my car, my mind already working through the logistics. Nessa thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. Time to show her how wrong she was. That evening, I drove to Ray's gym instead of going home. The converted warehouse sat in an industrial district south of downtown, wedged between a tire shop and a place that repaired commercial refrigeration units. The neon sign flickered intermittently, casting red shadows on the wet pavement. Inside, the familiar smell of sweat and leather wrapped around me like an old jacket. Ray was working with a young kid on the heavy bag, calling out combinations in his gravelly voice. He saw me come in and nodded toward the locker room. "Get changed, college boy. You look like you need to hit something." 20 minutes later, I was working the speed bag, trying to find a rhythm that would quiet the noise in my head. Ray watched from nearby, occasionally calling out corrections to my form. "Hands up. Keep your elbows in. Don't chase the bag, let it come to you." The repetitive motion was hypnotic. Hit, 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 pause, hit, 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 pause. Each impact sent vibrations up my arms, grounding me in something physical and immediate. "You want to talk about whatever's eating you?" Ray asked after I'd been at it for 10 minutes. I caught the bag and held it still, breathing hard. "My wife's been having an affair." Ray nodded like this was the most natural thing in the world. "How long?" 2 years, maybe more. She's got a whole separate life set up. Apartment, bank accounts, fake identity, the works. "You confront her yet?" "No. I'm still gathering information." Ray studied my face. "You planning to leave her or fight for her?" The question caught me off guard. In all my conversations with Angela, all my reviewing of evidence and planning of next steps, I hadn't really considered the possibility of fighting for Nessa. The betrayal was too complete, too calculated. She hadn't made a mistake or had a momentary lapse in judgment. She'd built an entire alternate reality. "I'm planning to make sure she doesn't get away with it," I said finally. "That's not the same thing." "No," I agreed. "It's not." My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at the screen and saw Lumi's name. That was unusual. Lumi and I barely spoke unless we were at family gatherings. "Hey Finn, can we talk? It's about Nessa. She's really worried about you." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Sure, coffee tomorrow morning?" The response came immediately. "Perfect. Grind coffee on Pine at 9? See you there." I put the phone away and looked at Ray. "Her best friend wants to meet tomorrow, probably going to try to run interference." "You going?" "Absolutely. Time to see how deep this goes." The next morning, I arrived at Grind Coffee 15 minutes early and claimed a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. Lumi walked in exactly at 9, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater that probably cost more than most people's rent. She spotted me immediately and hurried over, sliding into the chair across from me with a concerned expression that looked practiced. "Finn, thank goodness. I've been so worried about both of you." "Have you?" I kept my voice neutral, friendly even. "That's sweet of you." "Nessa's been beside herself. She says you've been distant lately, not coming home, not answering her calls. She thinks maybe you're having some kind of breakdown." I sipped my coffee and studied Lumi's face. She was good. The concern looked genuine. The worry lines around her eyes seemed real. If I hadn't seen Angela's evidence, I might have bought the performance. "I've been working a lot," I said. "Big project deadline coming up. You know how it is." "But 3 days without contact? That's not like you, Finn. Nessa's scared something's wrong." "What do you think might be wrong?" Lumi hesitated, and I caught a flicker of something behind her eyes. Calculation, maybe. Or fear. "I don't know. Work stress? You've been carrying a lot lately with your dad being sick and everything." "Interesting." She was fishing, trying to figure out how much I knew without revealing anything herself. "My dad's doing as well as can be expected," I said. "Though it's funny you mention him." "Did you know Nessa's been in contact with his attorney?" Lumi's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "What do you mean?" "Oh, just some questions about his will, making sure she understood what would happen to his assets when he passes. You know, planning ahead." That seems reasonable. I mean, you're married. It affects her too." "Sure," I agreed. Though it's interesting that she was asking about it 8 months ago when Dad's condition wasn't nearly as serious, almost like she was planning for something. Lumi set down her cup with shaking hands. Finn, I think you might be reading too much into things. Nessa loves you. She's just been going through a difficult time lately. What kind of difficult time? I don't know if I should be the one telling you this. Please, I'm concerned about her too. Lumi leaned forward, lowering her voice. She's been feeling trapped, Finn. Like maybe she got married too young, before she really knew who she was. She's been questioning things, wondering what else might be out there. And you've been helping her figure that out? I've been listening, being a friend. Sometimes people need space to explore their feelings. Space to explore. I repeated the phrase slowly. Is that what you call the apartment on Pine Street? Lumi went pale. For a moment she looked like she might bolt from the coffee shop. Then something shifted in her expression, and I saw a flash of the real Lumi, the one who'd been consistently late to work, who'd argued with every piece of feedback, who'd acted like the world owed her something. How did you... She started, then caught herself. How did I what? Nothing. I don't know what you're talking about. The apartment where Nessa's been living under her maiden name, where the neighbors think she's single, where she keeps a completely separate wardrobe and meets with her boyfriend twice a week. Lumi's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Finn, I can explain. Please do. She looked around the coffee shop nervously, then leaned closer. It's not what you think. She's not trying to hurt you. She just needed somewhere to figure things out, somewhere she could be herself without all the pressure of being a wife. And you helped her set it up. I helped her get the apartment, yes, but only because I was worried about her. She was so unhappy, Finn, so confused about what she wanted. For 2 years? It takes time to figure out who you are. Her voice had risen, and several other customers turned to look at us. Lumi noticed and lowered her voice again. Look, maybe she went about it the wrong way, but her heart was in the right place. She loves you, but she needed to know what else was out there before she could fully commit. We've been married for 6 years, Lumi. Exactly. 6 years of being what you wanted her to be. 6 years of playing the perfect wife while she lost herself completely. There it was, the real story. Not Nessa's confused exploration of her identity, not some spontaneous midlife awakening, but a carefully constructed narrative where I was the villain, the cold architect husband, the controlling presence, the man who'd allegedly forced his wife into a role she never wanted, while everyone else heroically helped her find herself. Seeing it laid out so clearly made something in me finally click. This wasn't chaos, it was design. Is that what you told her? I asked, keeping my voice level. That I was controlling her? I told her the truth, Lumi said without hesitation. That she deserved to be happy, that she deserved to know what real passion felt like. Real passion, I repeated. Like what she has with Orion. Lumi's eyes widened just a fraction, but it was enough. A slip, a crack. How do you know about her boyfriend? I cut in smoothly. The one she's been seeing for 2 years? The one she's been telling about our finances and my father's will? She hasn't told him about the will. Lumi snapped reflexively, then froze. So you admit you know about Orion? The fight drained out of her shoulders all at once. Lumi slumped back in her chair, staring at the tabletop like it might offer an escape hatch. Yes, I know about him. And yes, I think he's good for her. He makes her feel alive in a way you never have. By helping her steal money from our joint accounts? That money is hers too, she shot back. Not when she's moving it to secret accounts and lying about where it's going. Lumi was quiet for a long moment, fingers tightening around her coffee cup. When she finally looked up, her expression had changed. The warmth was gone. The concern was gone. What replaced it was sharp, resentful, and unmistakably personal. You want to know the truth, Finn? The real truth? I'd love to hear it. You fired me 3 years ago, humiliated me in front of the entire office, called me unprofessional and unreliable, said I'd never make it in architecture. You were consistently late, I replied calmly. You missed deadlines. You spent more time on social media than working. That's not humiliation. That's consequences. You destroyed my career before it even started. You destroyed your own career, I said. I just documented it. That did it. Lumi's facade finally cracked completely, years of resentment spilling out at once. So yes, she snapped. When Nessa started complaining about how controlling and cold you were, I listened. And when she said she was curious about other men, I encouraged her. And when she met Orion and realized what she'd been missing, I helped her figure out how to explore that relationship. You orchestrated the whole thing. I gave her permission to be happy. You manipulated her into having an affair as revenge against me. Lumi shot to her feet, grabbing her purse with shaking hands. She's going to leave you, Finn. Sooner or later, she's going to realize she deserves better than a cold, controlling man who cares more about his blueprints than his wife. And when she does, I'll be there to help her start over. No, I said calmly, not raising my voice. You won't. She paused, half turned toward the door, eyes narrowing. What's that supposed to mean? It means I know everything, Lumi. The apartment, the money, the lies to the marriage counselor, your little text message conversations planning her alibis, all of it. You can't prove anything. I pulled out my phone and turned the screen toward her. The recording app was still running, the timer ticking steadily upward. Actually, I can prove quite a bit, including the fact that you just admitted to orchestrating my wife's affair as revenge for me firing you. Lumi's face drained of color. You recorded me? Washington is a one-party consent state, I said evenly. I can record any conversation I'm part of without telling the other person. She stared at the phone, then back at me, the calculation happening in real time. What do you want? I want you to understand that the game has changed. You thought you were playing chess while I was playing checkers. But I've been watching Lumi, learning, planning. I stood up and put on my jacket. Nessa set the rules when she decided our marriage was just a cover story for her real life. You helped her build that cover story. Now you both get to live with the consequences. Finn, wait. But I was already walking toward the door. Behind me, I could hear Lumi fumbling for her phone, probably calling Nessa to warn her that their carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. Good. Let them panic. Let them try to figure out how much I knew and what I planned to do with the information. The real show was just getting started. I spent the rest of the day at the office, but my mind wasn't on the Morrison project or any of the other deadlines looming over my desk. Instead, I was thinking about chess moves and construction timelines, about building something methodically, step by step, until the final piece fell into place. Angela called around 3 o'clock. Your wife's been busy since this morning, she said without preamble. 3 calls to Orion, 2 to the apartment landlord, and 1 very long conversation with Lumi that ended with her throwing her phone across the room. You're watching the apartment? Watching and listening. I've got audio surveillance set up across the street. Your wife showed up there around noon, packed 2 suitcases, and started moving things out. She's running. Looks like it. But here's the interesting part. Orion doesn't seem to be on board with the plan. I recorded their conversation from this afternoon. Want to hear it? Send it to me. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in my car in the office parking lot, listening to my wife's voice through my phone's speakers. The audio quality was surprisingly good. Angela had invested in professional equipment. Nessa, we have to go, Orion, now, tonight. Orion, slow down. What exactly did Lumi tell you? Nessa, that Finn knows everything. The apartment, the money, all of it. Orion, How could he know? We've been careful. Nessa. Apparently not careful enough. Look, I've got most of the cash moved to the safety deposit box. We can take it and go to Vancouver tonight, figure out the rest later. Orion. Vancouver? Nessa, I can't just leave. I've got the app launch next week, investors to meet with. Nessa. None of that matters if Finn goes to the police. Orion. The police? What exactly have we done that's illegal? Nessa. The money, Orion. The Bitcoin transfers. He could claim I stole it. Orion. But you said it was yours. You showed me the documents. Nessa. The documents were simplified versions, for your understanding. Orion. What the hell does that mean? Nessa. It means we need to leave. Tonight. Orion. You lied to me about the money? Nessa. I didn't lie, I presented it in a way that was easier to understand. Orion. Jesus Christ, Nessa. Are you telling me that money was stolen? Nessa. It's community property. I have every right to… Orion. To move it to secret accounts without telling your husband? That's theft. Nessa. So, you're not coming with me? Orion. I'm not going to prison for you. I thought this was just an affair, not a criminal conspiracy. The recording cut off there. I sat in my car for a long moment, processing what I'd heard. Nessa's carefully constructed world was falling apart, and she was trying to drag Orion down with her. But Orion, for all his faults, wasn't stupid enough to become an accessory to financial fraud. My phone rang. Nessa's name appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. This time I answered. Hello, Nessa. Finn, thank God. We need to talk. Do we? Yes, right now. Can you come home? I'm still at work. Remember? Big deadline coming up. This is more important than work. Please, Finn. I need to explain some things. Her voice was different now, smaller. The confidence and manipulation were gone, replaced by something that sounded like genuine fear. Explain what things? Just, can you please come home? I'll make dinner. We can talk properly. I'll be there in an hour. I hung up and called Angela. She wants to meet, tonight at the house. You sure that's smart? Cornered animals do unpredictable things. I'm not going in unprepared. Can you park nearby, in case things go sideways? Already on my way. The drive home took me through the neighborhood where Nessa and I had built our life together. Tree-lined streets with craftsman houses and well-maintained lawns, families walking dogs, kids riding bikes on sidewalks, normal people living normal lives, unaware that one of their neighbors was about to have a very abnormal conversation. I pulled into our driveway and sat for a moment, looking at the house we'd bought 4 years ago. We'd spent months renovating it, arguing about paint colors and cabinet hardware. Nessa had insisted on an open floor plan and a kitchen island big enough for entertaining. I'd wanted a home office with built-in bookshelves and good natural light. We'd compromised on everything, the way married couples do, the way I'd thought married couples do. The front door opened before I could get out of the car. Nessa stood in the doorway, backlit by the warm light from inside. She'd changed into jeans and a sweater, casual clothes that made her look younger, more vulnerable. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wasn't wearing makeup. It was a calculated look, designed to remind me of the woman I'd fallen in love with 8 years ago. The woman who'd seemed genuine and straightforward and incapable of the kind of systematic deception I'd discovered. "Hi," she said softly as I walked up the front steps. "Hi." Inside, the house smelled like garlic and herbs. She'd been cooking, another calculated move. Comfort food to go with the vulnerable appearance. "I made your favorite," she said, gesturing toward the kitchen. "Chicken marsala." "That's thoughtful." We stood in the entryway for a moment, looking at each other. Up close, I could see the stress of the past few days written on her face. Dark circles under her eyes, tension lines around her mouth. She looked like someone who hadn't been sleeping well. "Finn," she started, then stopped. I don't know how to begin this conversation. Why don't you start with the truth? She flinched like I'd slapped her. The truth is complicated. Try me. She walked into the living room and sat down on the couch we'd picked out together 2 years ago. I remained standing, keeping distance between us. I've been unhappy, she said finally, for a long time. I didn't know how to tell you because I wasn't sure what was wrong or how to fix it. So you decided to have an affair. Her eyes widened. How did you know about Orion? About the apartment? About the money you've been moving to secret accounts? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. How long have you known? Long enough. Are you going to leave me? The question caught me off guard. Even now, even after everything I'd discovered, part of her still thought this was about our marriage. Still thought there was a way to manage the situation, to spin it into something salvageable. Nessa, you've been living a completely separate life for 2 years. You've stolen nearly $200,000 from our joint accounts. You've been lying to our marriage counselor, to your family, to me. What exactly is there left to save? I never meant for it to go this far. What did you mean for it to go? I just wanted to feel alive again, to remember what it was like to be wanted, to be exciting to someone. So you rented an apartment under a fake name and moved money to secret accounts because you wanted to feel exciting? The apartment was just somewhere I could go to think, to be myself without having to be your wife all the time. And Orion? She was quiet for a long moment. Orion was a mistake, a big one. But Finn, I never stopped loving you. You have a funny way of showing love. I know how it looks. I know I've made terrible choices. But if you can forgive me, if we can work through this. There's nothing to work through, Nessa. You didn't make a mistake. You built an alternate reality. You created a whole separate identity, complete with financial accounts and fake documentation. That's not a mistake. That's a plan. It wasn't a plan. It just evolved. Into what? What was the end game here? Were you planning to leave me for Orion? Take half of everything plus the money you'd already stolen? I don't know. I wasn't thinking that far ahead. But Lumi was. Nessa's head snapped up. What does Lumi have to do with this? She told me this morning about how she orchestrated the whole thing as revenge for me firing her. About how she convinced you that I was controlling and cold, how she encouraged you to explore other relationships, how she helped you set up the apartment. That's not... She didn't orchestrate anything, she was just being a friend. A friend who had keys to your secret apartment. A friend who provided alibis for your affair. A friend who convinced you that stealing money from your husband was justified because you deserved to explore your options. Nessa stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. Everyone expects me to be the perfect wife, the perfect daughter-in-law. I lost myself completely in this marriage. So, you found yourself by lying and stealing and cheating. I found myself by remembering what it felt like to be desired, to be interesting to someone, to have conversations that weren't about work deadlines and mortgage payments. And was it worth it? She turned to face me, and I saw something desperate in her eyes. I don't know. Maybe. For a while it felt like I was finally living instead of just existing. Well, congratulations. You're about to get all the excitement you can handle. What does that mean? I pulled out my phone and showed her the recording app. It means I've documented everything, Nessa. The apartment lease, the financial transfers, the affair, Lumi's confession this morning. All of it. She stared at the phone like it was a snake. You recorded me? I recorded Lumi. But I've got plenty of evidence about you too. What are you going to do with it? That depends on you. For the first time since I'd walked into the house, I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. What do you mean? I mean you have choices to make. Starting right now. I walked to the front door and opened it. You can stay here tonight and we can discuss the terms of our divorce like civilized adults. Or you can run back to your apartment and try to figure out how to explain this to your family, your boss, And the immigration attorney handling your citizenship application? My citizenship application? The one that depends on my continued sponsorship. The one that becomes invalid if I withdraw my support. The color drained from her face. You wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Withdraw sponsorship for someone who's been systematically betraying me for 2 years? Someone who's stolen nearly $200,000 and lied about it to federal immigration officials? Finn, please. You can't send me back to Canada. This is my home now. Then you should have thought about that before you decided to treat our marriage like a convenience store you could rob whenever you needed something. She sank back down onto the couch, finally understanding the scope of what she was facing. What do you want from me? I want you to understand that the game has changed. You set the rules when you decided to live a double life. Now I get to decide what happens next. And what happens next? I looked at her sitting there. The woman I'd loved, the woman I'd planned to spend my life with, the woman who'd been systematically destroying everything we'd built together. Next, you get to live with the consequences of your choices. I walked out the front door, leaving her alone in the house we'd shared. Behind me, I could hear her starting to cry. Real tears this time, not the calculated emotion she'd been using to manipulate me. It was the sound of someone finally understanding that their carefully constructed world was about to collapse. And I was just getting started. The next week passed in a blur of legal consultations and strategic planning. I met with a divorce attorney, a forensic accountant, and an immigration lawyer. Each conversation added another piece to the puzzle of how to dismantle Nessa's carefully constructed alternate reality. The divorce attorney, Margaret Walsh, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd seen every variation of marital betrayal imaginable. You've got a strong case, she said, reviewing Angela's evidence files. The financial fraud alone is grounds for a very favorable settlement. Add in the affair documentation and the systematic deception, and you're looking at keeping most of your assets. What about her citizenship application? That's more complicated. Withdrawing sponsorship is your legal right, but the timing matters. If you do it now, while the application is pending, it sends her back to square one. If you wait until after the divorce is finalized, she might have other options. And if she's deported? Margaret shrugged. Not your problem. She created this situation by committing immigration fraud, lying about the nature of your marriage while her application was pending. The forensic accountant, David Kim, had even better news. She's been sloppy with the digital trail, he said, showing me printouts of blockchain transactions. Every Bitcoin transfer is documented and traceable. We can prove exactly when the money was moved, where it went, and how it was converted to cash. That's textbook financial fraud. Can she claim it was community property? Not when it was moved to accounts under a false identity without the other spouse's knowledge. That's theft, regardless of the source of the funds. But it was the immigration attorney, Patricia Santos, who gave me the most interesting information. Your wife's been in contact with our office, she said during our consultation. She called yesterday asking about options if her marriage sponsorship was withdrawn. What did you tell her? The truth, that she'd have 30 days to leave the country unless she could find another basis for legal residency. Work visa, student visa, investment visa, but all of those require clean background checks. And if she has a criminal record, then she's deportable regardless of her other qualifications. I thought about that conversation as I sat in my car outside Nessa's apartment building on Pine Street. Angela had confirmed that Nessa was inside, probably trying to figure out her next move. Orion hadn't been back since their argument 3 days ago. Apparently, he'd decided that whatever passion they'd shared wasn't worth risking federal fraud charges. My phone buzzed with a text from Ray. You ready for tonight? Tonight was Nessa's parents' anniversary party. 30 years of marriage, being celebrated at their country club with family and friends. Nessa had been planning to attend, probably hoping to maintain the appearance of normalcy while her world fell apart behind the scenes. I'd been planning to skip it. But then I'd had a better idea. "Ready," I texted back. The country club was exactly what you'd expect. Manicured lawns, expensive cars in the parking lot, and the kind of understated luxury that whispered rather than shouted. Nessa's parents, Robert and Helen Varon, had been members for 20 years. They'd hosted our engagement party here, back when I'd thought I was marrying into a family that valued honesty and commitment. I arrived early and found Robert at the bar, nursing a scotch and looking uncomfortable in his formal wear. "Finn!" He seemed genuinely pleased to see me. "I wasn't sure you'd make it. Nessa said you've been working crazy hours lately." "The Morrison project is keeping me busy," I agreed. "But I wouldn't miss this. 30 years is quite an achievement." "It is indeed. Though I have to say, marriage isn't always easy. Takes work from both sides." "It does," I agreed, "especially when both sides are honest about what they want." Robert gave me a sharp look. "Everything okay with you and Nessa? She seemed stressed lately." "We're working through some things." Before Robert could ask for details, Helen appeared at his elbow. Nessa's mother was an elegant woman in her mid-60s with the kind of refined bearing that came from generations of social privilege. "Finn, darling, how wonderful that you could join us." She kissed my cheek and stepped back to study my face. "You look tired. Are you taking care of yourself?" "I'm fine, Helen. Just busy with work." "And where's my daughter? Don't tell me she's going to be late to her own parents' anniversary party." "She should be here soon," I said, though I had no idea if that was true. Nessa and I hadn't spoken since our confrontation at the house 4 days ago. The party was in full swing when Nessa finally arrived. She looked stunning in a black cocktail dress and the diamond necklace Orion had bought her. The one she'd claimed was a gift from Lumi. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. To anyone who didn't know better, she looked like the successful lawyer and devoted daughter they expected to see. But I could see the strain around her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. She was performing, playing the role of the happy wife and daughter, while her real world crumbled in private. She found me by the appetizer table, talking to her uncle about the challenges of historic building renovation. "Finn." Her smile was bright and artificial. "I didn't know you were coming." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, leaning over to kiss her cheek. "You look beautiful." "Thank you." She glanced around nervously. "Can we talk? Privately?" "Of course. But first, I think your parents want to make a speech." Robert had indeed moved to the front of the room and was tapping his champagne glass with a fork. The conversations died down as everyone turned to face him. "Helen and I want to thank you all for being here tonight," he began. 30 years ago, we promised to love and honor each other through whatever life brought our way. It hasn't always been easy, but we've built something together that we're proud of. A marriage based on trust, honesty, and mutual respect. The crowd applauded politely. I noticed Nessa shifting uncomfortably beside me. "We've also been blessed with a wonderful daughter," Robert continued, "who found her own partner in life. Finn, would you and Nessa come up here for a moment?" My heart started beating faster, but I kept my expression neutral as we made our way to the front of the room. Robert put his arm around Nessa's shoulders, while Helen took my hand. "Marriage is about building something together," Robert said to the crowd. "About creating a life that's bigger than either person could manage alone. About honesty, even when it's difficult. About trust, even when it's tested." He looked directly at Nessa. "Your mother and I have watched you and Finn build that kind of partnership. The kind that will last through whatever challenges come your way." I felt Nessa tense beside me. The irony of her father's words, spoken in front of 50 people who had no idea what kind of partnership we'd actually built, was almost overwhelming. "So please," Robert continued, raising his glass, "join us in toasting not just 30 years of marriage, but the continuing tradition of love and commitment that our family represents. The crowd raised their glasses and drank. I sipped my champagne and smiled, playing my role perfectly. Beside me, Nessa managed to get through the toast without breaking down, though I could see her hands shaking. As the crowd dispersed and conversations resumed, Nessa grabbed my arm. "We need to talk, now." I followed her out to the club's terrace where we could speak privately without being overheard. "How could you do that?" she hissed the moment we were alone. "Do what?" "Stand there and let my father talk about honesty and trust while you're planning to destroy our marriage." "I'm not destroying our marriage, Nessa. You already did that. I made mistakes. I admit that. But this public humiliation—" "What public humiliation?" "I haven't said a word to anyone about your affair or your secret apartment or the money you stole. Yet." "Yet," I agreed. She stared at me, and I could see her trying to figure out what I wanted, what would make me stop whatever I was planning. "What will it take?" she asked finally. "What will what take? To make this go away, to keep you from destroying everything." I leaned against the terrace railing and looked out at the perfectly manicured golf course. "You still don't get it, do you?" "Get what?" "This isn't about punishment, Nessa. This isn't about revenge or making you pay for what you did. This is about consequences." "What's the difference?" "Punishment is something I do to you. Consequences are something you do to yourself." I turned to face her. "You made choices. You chose to have an affair. You chose to steal money. You chose to lie to immigration officials about the nature of our marriage. You chose to create an entire alternate identity. Every single choice you made led inevitably to this moment. But you're choosing how to respond to those choices." "Yes, I am, and I'm choosing to make sure everyone knows exactly who you really are." Her face went pale. "You're going to tell them, tonight." "I'm going to tell them the truth. About the apartment, about Orion, about the money, about the lies you told to our marriage counselor and your immigration attorney, all of it." "Finn, please. Think about what this will do to my parents, to my career, to my entire life." I did think about it. I thought about it for a week while I decided how to handle this situation, and I realized that you never thought about what your choices would do to my life, or to our marriage, or to the people who trusted you. That's not true, isn't it? When you were setting up your secret apartment, did you think about how I'd feel when I found out? When you were stealing money from our joint accounts, did you consider what that would do to our financial security? When you were lying to Dr. Reeves about our marriage, did you care how that would affect our counseling sessions?" She was quiet for a long moment. I thought I could manage it. Keep everything separate. Figure out what I wanted without hurting anyone. But you couldn't. Because that's not how life works. Actions have consequences and lies have a way of coming to light. "So, this is it? You're going to humiliate me in front of my family and then divorce me?" "I'm going to tell the truth. What happens after that is up to you." I started to walk back toward the party, then paused. "Oh, and Nessa? I withdrew my sponsorship for your citizenship application this morning. You have 30 days to find another basis for legal residency or leave the country." Her sharp intake of breath followed me as I walked back into the country club. Inside, the party was still going strong. People were laughing, dancing, celebrating 30 years of marriage built on honesty and trust. Time to show them what the alternative looked like. I found the DJ and had a quiet conversation about using his microphone. Then I walked to the front of the room and waited for the current song to end. "Excuse me," I said into the microphone. "Could I have everyone's attention for a moment?" The conversations died down as 50 faces turned toward me. I could see Nessa in the doorway, her face frozen in horror. "I wanted to take a moment to talk about marriage," I began. "About what it really means to build a life with someone. About honesty and trust and the consequences when those things break down." Robert and Helen were smiling, probably thinking I was about to give a sweet speech about love and commitment. 6 years ago, I married a woman I thought I knew. A woman who seemed honest and straightforward and incapable of systematic deception. For 4 years, I believed I was building the kind of marriage Robert and Helen have modeled for us tonight. I paused, letting the silence build. 2 weeks ago, I discovered that my wife has been living a completely separate life. She rented an apartment under her maiden name, where she's been having an affair for the past 2 years. She systematically moved nearly $200,000 from our joint accounts to secret Bitcoin wallets, then converted that money to cash and stored it in a safety deposit box I didn't know existed. The room was completely silent now. Not the polite silence of people listening to a speech, but the heavy, stunned quiet that follows something irreversible. I could see shock, confusion, and growing understanding on the faces in front of me. People leaned forward without realizing it, hands frozen halfway to glasses or phones, eyes fixed on me as if waiting for someone to say this was all a misunderstanding. She lied to our marriage counselor about the nature of our relationship, claiming I was controlling and abusive to justify her actions. She lied to immigration officials about our marriage while her citizenship application was pending. She created an entire false identity, complete with financial accounts and fake documentation. A murmur rippled through the room and then died instantly, as if no one dared be the first to speak. Someone in the back of the room gasped, the sound sharp and involuntary. I could see Nessa's uncle shaking his head in disbelief, his mouth slightly open, as though he were replaying years of family memories and suddenly finding them unreliable. The woman you know as my wife, as Robert and Helen's daughter, has been living a lie for 2 years. Everything you think you know about our marriage, about her character, about the person she's pretended to be, all of it is fiction. I let the words settle. There was nothing more to add, no dramatic flourish required. The truth, laid out cleanly and methodically, did the damage on its own. I set the microphone back on its stand and walked toward the exit, my footsteps unnaturally loud against the polished floor. Behind me, the room erupted in shocked conversations and horrified whispers, voices overlapping, questions colliding, denial and anger bleeding into each other. In the doorway, Nessa stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. Her makeup had smeared, her carefully maintained composure finally gone. "How could you do this to me?" she whispered, her voice breaking in a way that might have once undone me. "I didn't do this to you," I said quietly. "You did this to yourself. I just made sure everyone knew about it." I walked past her and out of the country club, leaving behind the wreckage of her carefully constructed world. The night air felt colder, sharper, like a reset button being pressed. In the parking lot, I could hear the chaos continuing inside, raised voices, slamming doors, the sound of a family trying to process the complete destruction of everything they'd believed about their daughter. My phone buzzed with a text from Angela. "Clean exit, no loose ends, well done." I sat in my car for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, listening to the silence that followed real finality. For the first time in 2 weeks, I felt something like peace. Not happiness. This wasn't a happy ending for anyone. But the satisfaction of a job completed properly, a structure built to last, no corners cut, and no weak joints left to fail later. Nessa had set the rules when she decided our marriage was just a cover story for her real life. She'd thought she could manage the consequences, control the narrative, keep everyone in their assigned roles while she explored her options. She believed discretion would protect her, that silence was the same as safety. She'd been wrong. I started the engine and drove home to the house we'd shared, where I would now live alone. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of rebuilding my life without her. But tonight, I was content knowing that the blueprint for her ruin had been executed